Hey everybody, it's Tony George. Welcome back to the Gridiron Six Pack with my good buddy Griffin Murphy. I call him Griff.
Yes, sir.
Both of us off some hot weekends last weekend over at the website at Docs. However, Griff, the show we took a step back. The first losing show that we had all season long was last week, so we got some making up to do, brother.
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Well, I don't know why we wouldn't. And we're going to be talking about some of the biggest games out there this weekend. Matter of fact, the two biggest games, both in college and pro football. We're going to get right to it. And Griff, this week, a big one in the Big Ten national title implications, Big Ten implications, BCS playoff implications as Penn
hmm
State travels to Ohio State. Ohio State at home here, a 4.5 point favorite, total sitting at 46.5. And this one intrigues me. And by the way, you requested this. I didn't give you this. You said you wanted to talk about this. Better you than me. But one thing I've noticed about both these coaches, they have trouble winning the big one, and this is a big one. So they're both in the same boat. Of course, Franklin there at Penn State, 1-10 versus top five teams all time, 1-8 versus Ohio State. He's got a good team with a hell of a defense taking on Ohio State here, who's been battle tested already in a big game at Notre Dame. They're in Columbus at the Shoe. What do you think?
Yeah, this one, Tony, rolling in. I mean, we've got two. This is the Big Ten game of the year, to say the least. Right now, Penn State rolling in 6-0, while we've got Ohio State rolling in at 6-0. Both teams currently 3-0 in the Big Ten. We've already had Penn State kind of establish themselves, beating up on Illinois, blowing up on Iowa 31-0, and then really putting a beating on Northwestern, really taking care of business. And I mean, there's not a whole lot to talk about regarding this offense. We know Drew Aller at the helm, second year. I mean, he's absolutely stood out this season. And then at that running back spot, you've got Singleton and Allen, who are two very dynamic backs. That offensive line, stack loaded. You go to the defensive side of the football, it is the same thing. They have the number one best rushing defense on paper in all of football. And that is something to take into a huge accountability, because when you're playing a team like Ohio State, this game is going to come down to the big play. It's not going to be that Kalash shootout type of game. This game is going to go back and forth. And you've got Ryan Day, head coach for Ohio State, currently in the Big Ten. He is 31-2 against Big Ten opponents, which is absolutely dynamic, explosive. Ohio State, you can't take anything from them. This game's going to come down to Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison Jr. How are they going to set the tempo on that offensive side? And are they going to be able to deal with this rush game with Penn State on the defensive side? Penn State is outstanding across all levels of the football. And a key ingredient guy that I have eyed out in this matchup is going to be at that wide receiver spot with Lambert Smith. He is absolutely hauling off this season. I'm looking for Penn State to really open up this game, and the deciding factor is going to be, how are they going to move the ball? If they can push this Ohio State team backwards and kind of take the lead off of Drew Aller at that quarterback spot and really kind of drive and control this clock, I love Penn State in this game. Ohio State has been put to the test 3 times. They have capitalized all 3 times, but I've watched them throughout this entire season. Yes, they're 6-0, but they've had a plenty slippery games where they really didn't control that much of the game. And Tony, going at this game right now, looking at it, Penn State 6-0. How long have we been talking about Ohio State and Michigan in this Big Ten conference? You don't get a lot of Penn State. Well, finally, Penn State has put themselves at the pedestal, ready to kind of climb and escalate themselves and say, hey, we are the top team in this Big Ten conference. And you know what? I'm rolling with it this week, Tony. I love the points with Penn State, if not outright victory, which I'm calling right now the upset. But give me the 4.5 points with Penn State rolling into this matchup. Going to our next game, Tony, we got your boys, the Huskers. We've got Northwestern at Nebraska. Nebraska is at home in this game, laying 11.5 points. We have a total at 41.5. This game kicks off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday in Lincoln, Nebraska. This game can be watched on the Big Ten Network. Nebraska rolls in 2-1 at home this season, while Northwestern is currently winless, my apologies, on the road this season at 0-2. Both teams are 1-2 in Big Ten play. Northwestern has one of the worst rush defenses right now in all of football, while Nebraska is kind of dominating that run game, currently ranked 34th in rushing yards per game. Tony, what is your take, and how does Northwestern kind of control this run game with this Nebraska team?
Well, they're thin at running back. That's the problem. They've got a couple of guys out. Now, they use their quarterback a lot. Harburg is going to play for Nebraska. Now, both these teams are off a bye week, so they got healthy. Northwestern is going to get Bryant back at quarterback. Of course, Northwestern, one of their wins in the Big Ten was Minnesota. They racked up over 30 points on them. And, of course, one of Nebraska's Big Ten losses was a loss at Minnesota, and I'll tell you right now, this thing is always a good ball game. Always a good ball game. 5 out of the last 6 times these two have played have been one-possession ball games. 2 of them overtime. Nebraska won one on a Hail Mary in Lincoln, last play of the game. I was at the game, actually. I flew back for that one. But nonetheless, you got to ask yourself a question. What the hell's Nebraska doing laying double digits to anybody? Now, look. I got a lot of friends from Lincoln. I lived in Lincoln 26 years. I'm an alum there, a season ticket holder for 17 years. Both my kids were born in Lincoln. I got my start in radio in Lincoln. I got a lot of fond memories of Lincoln. You're literally born a Husker if you're from Lincoln, Nebraska. Both my children, out of the birthing canal within 20 minutes of being in the nursery, had Nebraska stocking caps on. They were born Huskers. That's all we got there in Nebraska. That, the men are men and the sheep are nervous. That's about it. But nonetheless, I think that this is going to be a tighter ball game. Whenever you have a game between two really good teams, it's always tight. Kind of like the one you mentioned at Penn State and Ohio State. We have the exact opposite scenario here. We have 2 of the worst teams in the Big Ten going at it.
Right.
And it's going to be a tighter ball game than 11.5 points. I'm going to take Northwestern, and I'm going to take them plus the 11.5 points. I think Nebraska can be a touchdown better at home off a bye week, but the injuries at running back and a couple other positions Nebraska has concern me, and the bye week didn't help them all that much. We're going to switch gears. We're going to stay in the Midwest, but we're going to go to the SEC, and a team flying under the radar right now, Griff, the Missouri Tigers. I mean, they basically are one bad play away against LSU for being unbeaten.
Right.
They took care of business big time last week down in Kentucky, although Kentucky is a one-dimensional offense with no quarterback. Well, South Carolina's got one. We all know Spencer Rattler started out at Oklahoma. Down there at South Carolina, they're not having the best year at 2-4. I think expectations were higher. Missouri is in the conversation for a division title in the SEC to get to the title game. I think this is a good football team. I think their coach has done, came from Appalachian State over here to Missouri. He's done some good things here. The Tigers, though, this jumped up from 6.5 when I sent it to you yesterday to 7. Yeah. Total up from 59.5 to 60.5. So we've got some movement on Missouri. We've got some movement on the over in this game. Your thoughts? This is a big game for Missouri.
It absolutely is a big game for Missouri, rolling in right now at 6-1, as you mentioned already. Their only loss was against LSU, where they scored 39 points in that game. They did allow 49 points. But this Missouri Tigers team is actually very, very sound across every single position on the field. They are dynamic at that offensive role with offensive coordinator Kirby Moore. I mean, this guy is absolutely outstanding. Yeah. And then you've got Brady Cook. Currently, he's already passed for 2,000 yards this season. He is going off, and he's got weapons across the board. One guy I want to key out on that offensive side is Luther Burden, who's already recorded 5 touchdowns and over 800 yards. That is his go-to guy. They are explosive together. They have a very good offensive front. They have a solid run game, very powerful at that quarterback spot, and very powerful on that wide receiver core. Defense is very, very sound. They keep all games stabilized besides their LSU matchup, and they've kind of already proven themselves. They've already beaten down on Kansas State, and then last week on the road, beating up the Wildcats in Kentucky by 17 points. I mean, that's it. It doesn't get much better than that, rolling in at 6-1 in the SEC. And then you look at a team like South Carolina, and despite their 2-4 record, which is brutal, they've had a very, very hard schedule. But they are literally stack loaded at that quarterback spot on the offensive side. Spencer Rattle, another absolute stud quarterback, very underrated under the map. And that's because this South Carolina team is currently 2-4. This guy's passed for already 11 touchdowns. He's got weapons all over the map. My apologies. And on top of that, 2-4 team in the SEC, they are currently ranked 17th in the country in passing yards. They're very sound offensively. Where they struggle is defensively, and it's not their front defensive line. It is the secondary. They are getting blown up. They just allowed Florida to put up over 40 points against them, and Graham Mertz in particular aired out over 430 yards against them in the pass game. So looking at this game, it's a very similar thing when you look at Florida and Missouri. We've got two very, very good quarterbacks and two very, very good receiving cores. That is something when I look at this game, I don't think South Carolina has a bad offense at all. As I've just mentioned, their defense is the struggle. So I'm looking for a lot of points in this game. And as you mentioned, Tony, yes, the total has bumped from 59.5 to 60.5. I'm still shooting that over. I have a small lean on Mizzou in this contest. But my play with you guys right now is railing the over at 60.5. That's my play going into this game. Switching gears right now, though, Tony, going into the NFL side of things. We've got the Green Bay Packers rolling into Denver. Denver is currently getting a 1.5 in this matchup. The total is 45. This game's going to kick off Sunday at 4:25 p.m. Eastern Time. Broncos head into this matchup with the worst defense in all of football, averaging 458 yards per game on the defensive side. Green Bay is 1-3 in their last 4 games, and they've dropped 2 straight games. They're coming off a loss to the Raiders, which was an awful performance. Tony, we already talked about that game. Brutal to watch. It was just terrible across all sides of the field. The offense has been a major struggle for this Green Bay Packers team. And is Jordan Love the quarterback? Is he the guy? I'm not sold on him just yet. And the Broncos are having major issues across the entire field. And are they going to be able to tighten up coming into this matchup on Sunday? Tony, what is your take?
Well, as broken as Denver is, Green Bay is just as broken.
Agreed.
Before that game with the Raiders, they got their ass kicked all over the field at home at Lambeau on a Thursday night against the Detroit Lions. Now, that's not totally embarrassing because Detroit might have the 3rd or 4th best team in the NFC. It's arguable.
Right.
That being said, we also have the scenario where you get 11 days to get ready to go play the Raiders. And you show up here on a Monday night and the only loss on a side or a total in the NFL for my premium plays the last 3 weeks was when I took Green Bay on Monday night. You're telling me that you couldn't put up a better showing against a bad Raiders team than that? And now you're going to go play another bad team. So when you have 2 bad teams playing and you got the home dog, who do you take? I've been doing this 32 years. I'm taking Denver. I'm taking Denver in this ball game. I think this is a week they get it together. I know it's going to be. So you have the worst defense in the NFL. Well, how's Green Bay going to exploit it? Their quarterback likes to throw it to guys in different colored jerseys. And I think, obviously they had some issues last week, but they played arguably the best team in the AFC in Kansas City last week. You're not going to look good against Kansas City if you're a struggling ball club. Which quarterback looks worse right now? Russell Wilson or Jordan Love? It's a toss-up. But at home, Mile High, Sean Payton, I think, probably the better coach. I'm going to go with an upset here. And if you don't like Denver plus 1.5 in this game, well, the under 45 could be in play as well, I think. But I tell you what would be in play, at least use Denver in a teaser, get them up to 7.5. Use them as one side of a teaser this weekend. against somebody else that you might like in the NFL on Sunday. Um, we have the Detroit Lions, who are just rolling. Here they go.
Yep.
Everybody's getting wound up about the Lions at Baltimore. A little bit of a surprise line to a lot of people that the Ravens coming home from London, laying a number, didn't seem to bother Jacksonville last weekend, coming
Mm-mm.
home 2 weeks in London and, hanging almost 40 points on the Colts. But you got to wonder if there's a hangover there with Baltimore. And you got to wonder, really, Griff, other than that opening game against Kansas City on the Thursday night to open up the NFL season, where Kansas City was without Kelsey in that game, you got to ask yourself, maybe you could throw Seattle in there, but really, who has Detroit played? Well, this is a big step up in class for them against the Ravens at home, laying 3, total 41.5. Your thoughts?
Agree. See, that's the thing, Tony, is scouting this entire schedule with Detroit. They really haven't had a very tough schedule. I mean, their toughest matchups have been against the Chiefs and then Tampa Bay, obviously, where they did just prevail and blow up in that victory. And here's the thing going into this matchup right now is right now, Montgomery and Gibbs for the run game for this Detroit Lions team are both questionable going into this matchup. And we are doing this on Wednesday, so that is something to keep in mind. This will obviously flip-flop. But that is something to keep in mind. And head coach Dan Campbell, I love this guy and the way he carries this Detroit Lions team. Jared Goff at the helm. He's already passed for over 15 touchdowns this season. And this team is going to rely, and they always will rely, on Jared Goff. He is one of those quarterbacks who is locked in 90% of the time. When he is locked in, this Detroit Lions team is locked in. When he is off, that 10% of time, 5% of time, he's brutal, and he'll throw 2 picks in a game. He'll be throwing balls out of bounds, missing receivers by 10 yards, and we've seen it. But going into this game, I really like the defensive matchup in this game. Right now, the Lions are currently the number one, on paper, the number one rush defense in all of football. And when you're playing a team like the Baltimore Ravens with Lamar Jackson at the helm, we've talked about it over and over again, show after show. Lamar is always dangerous and on his feet. He's thrown for 5 touchdowns this season. He's already thrown for 3 picks, but he's got over 1,300 yards. A lot of big chunk of his yardage is on the ground. He is somebody that you have to contain and keep your eyes on at all time of the game. When you have a rushing defense that explodes the way that this Detroit Lions team does, it is something that is very beneficial when you're playing a team like this. They do not have the greatest run game, do the Baltimore Ravens, with Gus Edwards in the backfield. They don't, but they have a very solid pass game. I would expect Mark Andrews to be utilized in this game. I would expect Zay Jones to be utilized in this matchup. But going over to the Baltimore Ravens defense, and this is what I really love in this game, as we spoke about this before, they run a hybrid utility-based defense. And coming into a game where Detroit is questionable at that running back spot, they're going to be very, very adaptable to how this Detroit Lions team runs their offense. And if Goff can't get it going in the air and they don't have anywhere to go on the run game, it could cause a tremendous amount of trouble for this Detroit Lions team. We already know, as I mentioned, the Detroit Lions are stacked on that defensive side, which is going to make it very difficult for Lamar Jackson to really tuck and run. He is going to have to air the ball out, and they are going to have to get that run game going, which is going to demoralize the clock. So give me the under in this game at 41.5. I like a low-scoring game in this matchup. I don't think either of these two teams, in hindsight, you can look from the outside and say, these are two very good offenses going at it. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. But if you really dissect this game and look inside, I don't think there's going to be a lot of points. So again, my play is going with the under 41.5 on this one. Tony, rolling into our last game, Sunday Night Football. Definitely last but not least. We've got the Miami Dolphins rolling into Philadelphia. The Eagles are currently laying 2 in this game. The total is 51.5. I mean, this game kicks off Sunday night, October 22nd at 8:20 p.m. Eastern Time, live on NBC. Miami has currently the number one best offense across the boards in all of football, with Tua, Mozart, Hill, and Waddle. And then you go over to Philadelphia. They're second on paper when it comes to the best offenses football. And I mean, you've got Swift, you've got Brown, you've got Hurts. You're dynamic. They're coming off, though, a 20-14 road loss to the Jets. Philadelphia definitely edges, though, when it comes to the secondary on this defensive side of this game. How do the Dolphins, Tony, kind of recalibrate and kind of explode on this defense with the Philadelphia Eagles in this matchup?
Well, I think they're both going to score. That's for sure. But here's the
I like your
deal.
reaction.
Here's the deal. You take a look at these two teams and you take a look and you say, why is Philadelphia favored too? Because Miami looks like they're steamrolling everybody, and Philadelphia really hasn't gotten it together all year long except one game, and that was against the Rams 2 weeks ago. And
Agreed.
yet they're laying 2 points. Yes, they're at home. The weather's going to be about 59 to 60 degrees. No participation in terms of rain, light winds. I've looked at the weather. You always want to look at this if you're sniffing around on a total or just even the outcome of the game. But I'll tell you what, right now, you're taking a look, you're going, what I see last week, more of the same this week. You don't do that in the NFL or you're going to lose your bankroll real quick. Teams change from week to week. That being said, I took a look at Miami here. They're the team that put up 70 in an NFL football game this year, but it was against the Broncos. You look at their schedule. Who have they played? Well, I tell you what, the best team they played was Buffalo, and they got motorboated in that ball game the entire game. They weren't even in the game. And by the way, for those of you playing the home version of I'm Betting the NFL, Buffalo isn't that good. You just saw that. They were gifted a game on Monday night by the refs. That they got outplayed, out-hustled, out-coached against the Giants, and yet they put Miami over their knee and absolutely beat the piss out of them like a redheaded stepchild. So here's what I got to say right now. Give me the Eagles minus the 2. And matter of fact, what I would do in this game, I haven't seen it. I'm going to assume, and I talk about this all the time, Griff, why lay 2 when you can play the money line? What happens if it ends up being 27-28? You never know. So I'd play them on the money line. I'm assuming they're around minus 135. This line might even go down, as you're going to see, because the public loves to bet Miami. They love to bet high-scoring teams, elite teams or perceived to be elite. They love betting overs. You're not going to see this at 51.5 on Sunday, and you're probably not going to see the Eagles at 2. That might go down to minus 1. Then you're looking at a push if you just want to stay on the minus 110 versus laying the added juice. But I think you can probably get them around 125, minus 120, even at 1.5 on Sunday. Give me the Eagles. And by the way, I'm not an Eagles fan, but I'm telling you, take the Eagles. Tell you that right now. I just think the Eagles get them. And until Miami can beat somebody really good, I'm a little concerned about it. And I'm actually still waiting, Griff. I'm still waiting. I don't know about you, but just looking at this, and I'll throw it back to you real quick. I really haven't seen Philly hit on all 8 cylinders all year long. Maybe that Rams game, but Hurts had a bad day last week as well. He hasn't been on top of his ball game, and they've got a new offensive coordinator and some different things they're doing on offense there. And I don't think they've gotten it together yet. Maybe this game will dial them in.
I couldn't agree more, Tony. And that's the biggest thing. Watching Hurts last week alone. I mean, this team, they really haven't been put to the test. And like you've mentioned, against the Rams, that was by far their best game all season. And if you have followed this team throughout the season, they really haven't blown up to the say where you can say, all right, we can separate this team from the rest of the teams in the NFL. They are not the San Francisco 49ers by any means. They're not in that loophole talk. I disagree with anybody who has them both together. They're very overrated, to say the least. Tony, I'll pass it back to you, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, I think this might raise a few eyebrows on Sunday night. It's not a game that, at least from a side play perspective, I'm going to get involved in. I'm still looking at that total. Sometimes also when it seems obvious that 2 teams are just going to go in there and just boat race up and down the field, it ends up being a 17-14 ball game. So you need to take a look at some intangibles here before you pull the trigger on that. But It should be a fireworks show, but let's take a look deeper into that and do a deeper dive as the week goes along. And as the week goes along, folks, number one is we appreciate you tuning in. We'd appreciate you smashing that subscribe button so you get alerted whenever Griff and I or any of the handicappers on the website have picks up for you. Take advantage of the free $60. We'll park $60 in any new account if you've never been a member, and you can get hooked up. I've had one side or totals play loss in the NFL in the last 3 weeks, up over $3,000 for a $100 player the last 3 weeks off a top pick weekend. I swept last week with North Texas in college, and I had the Ravens in a ball sweater at the end of that game there in London. Boy, did I get lucky to get out of that alive. Thank God it was Tennessee and Malik Willis at quarterback at the end of the game that couldn't get it done. But we've got a top play in college and a top play in the NFL this weekend. We're going to get it done for you. Don't forget also, you've got NASCAR, WNBA finals going on. You've got, well, maybe. We'll see what happens here on Wednesday night. We've also got the NHL kicking off, and the NBA is about 6 days away. Doc Sports has got a ton of free information for you over there at the website for all those sports, absolutely free. Futures picks, survivor pool picks, all kinds of different things for you to digest, help you make better decisions. Griff, what do you got on deck this weekend, buddy?
So yeah, Tony, I am launching out my 8-unit play of the year that goes out tomorrow on Thursday Night Football. So tune in on that. That will be, yes, sir.
What?
I'm on a 9-3.
Dude, I better be getting a text after this show.
I got you, brother. I got you, man. Oh, I've been scouting this play for 3 weeks, literally. So I'm locked in. I'm ready to go. I'm not going to touch any more base on that play. We did have a great, phenomenal weekend last weekend. We capitalized 5-1 on the weekend, sweeping college football, going 2-0. I had Florida against South Carolina as my top play in the college football side of things. 6-unit play that absolutely annihilated. Outright victory. I had Florida with the points. And then I'm back-to-back 3-1 weekends for NFL. So we're on a 9-3 run, absolutely steamrolling. Finally, I've been hunting down that 8-unit play of the year. I finally got it. So I am going to be blasting that guy off. And then on Saturday, I will have, right now I have 3 plays eyed out, including a 6-unit best bet. And then it's going to be very low volume on Sunday because obviously I have my play of the year blasting off tomorrow. I have 2 plays going out on Sunday, and there'll be a 4-unit and a 3-unit inside there. Although I'm nailing my 3 units, man. I'm currently 5-1 in NFL on my 3-unit plays. So they're drilling. Ride the trend. We're hot. So yeah, Tony, across the board, we've been lights out across football right now, and I am looking to have an even better weekend going into this weekend.
There you go, folks. Griff Murphy's got his NFL Game of the Year going on this weekend. We've got some top plays ourselves. I'm going to be getting that text from Griff after the show.
Yes, you will.
Or I'm going to drive down to Scottsdale and beat his ass. So nonetheless. And I'm sure Jeremy, our producer, is going to want that too. He needs some traveling money. He goes to a lot of Chiefs games during his downtime. So nonetheless, be sure and leave some comments, folks. We'll get back to you. Griff answered most of them last week, but I jump in from time to time. If you have opposite sides or a game that you like, we'll post them in the comments. We got to filter out the F-bombs and the porn sites and the competitor putting links to the Super Lock of the Millennium page on their website, but we will put up the relevant comments there. We love to interact with you. We appreciate you tuning in. And Until next week, for Griffin Murphy, I'm Tony George. Thanks for tuning in.